Chapter 1. A Tranquil Haven. Nestled in the bosom of towering mountains, a tranquil town quietly sat, its tranquility broken only by the soft whispers of nature. This place was an idyllic retreat, a refuge from the hustle and bustle of the big cities. On most mornings, the rising sun would peek over the sharp mountain ridges, casting a warm golden glow on the sleepy town. The small houses, painted in soothing colors, were scattered like speckles of paint across the vast green canvas of the valley. As the sun ascended higher, the mountains would unveil their majesty. Snow-capped peaks, like frosting on a grand cake, stood proud against the azure backdrop of the sky. Dense forests of pine and spruce dressed the lower slopes, their greenery occasionally broken by the twisting, turning paths, inviting the adventurous for a trek. In the heart of the town, there were quaint cafes serving hot cocoa, small boutiques selling hand-knit scarves and caps, and friendly bed and breakfasts offering cozy corners for a peaceful retreat. On the outskirts, sprawling estates and luxurious cabins quietly declared the presence of those from the glamour world seeking an escape. With the arrival of winter, the town would transform into a paradise for skiers. The very same trails that were frequented by walkers in the summer now served as ski paths. The thrill of the downhill slide, the whipping of the cold wind against the face, the challenge of the sharp turns, they attracted both novices and experts from far and wide. This was a place where life moved at its own relaxed pace, where each day promised peace and serenity. But as tranquil as this haven was, a chilling discovery was about to disrupt its calmness and transform it into the setting of a chilling mystery. As the day began to unravel in the tranquil town, a chilling whisper started to stir the air. The usual calm was replaced by a strange unease that seemed to creep into every street and every home, shattering the peaceful morning. At the heart of this unease was the town's local police station. As officers whispered among themselves, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief, the news that broke out was far from ordinary. The peaceful town, with its idyllic charm, had just turned into the setting of a horrifying discovery. The body of a young girl had been found, not a stranger passing through, but one of their own, a girl who had played on their streets, laughed in their parks, and grown under their watchful eyes. It was a sight that turned stomachs and squeezed hearts, a sight that was so out of place in this serene haven. Our protagonist, a pillar of the community and well-respected among townsfolk, received a phone call. The news passed through the line hit him like a punch, stealing away his breath. The voice on the other end belonged to the chief of police, his words heavy with sadness and disbelief. "There's been a murder," he announced, his voice wavering slightly. A murder. The word hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting a gloomy shadow over the peaceful town. It was a term so foreign, so out of place in their tranquil lives. The town was known for its skying accidents, perhaps the occasional injuries from a wild animal. But murder? For our protagonist, the day had started just like any other. But as the news sank in, he knew that this was no ordinary day. And this peaceful town was no longer just an idyllic retreat. As he hung up the phone, he realized that a challenging journey lay ahead. He was now the harbinger of justice in a town grappling with an unthinkable crime. This was just the beginning. Chapter 2. The First Cold Winds. The news of the murder hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the tragedy that had befallen the peaceful town. Our protagonist, who we'll call John, sat in his humble home, the silence of his living room punctuated only by the ticking of the clock. The phone call from the police chief, his old friend Dave, echoed in his mind. there's been a murder. John was a sturdy man, weathered by the mountainous terrain he had grown up in, yet this news felt like a harsh, cold wind cutting through his usually impervious demeanor. Murder was a word that didn't belong here, among the snow-covered hills and laughing children. It was a word for the cities, for the chaotic world beyond their serene sanctuary. And yet, here it was, casting its dark shadow over their peaceful lives. He moved to the window, peering out at the quiet street. The mountains loomed in the distance, as immovable and majestic as ever. The town seemed as tranquil as it always did, the tranquility now seeming almost deceptive. Underneath this calm exterior, John knew a storm was brewing. He thought of the young girl, her life brutally snuffed out. Her face flashed in his mind, a local girl, full of dreams and youth. The reality of her demise was a harsh contrast to the innocent life she had lived. As he processed the shocking news, a wave of resolve washed over him. He felt a sudden sense of responsibility. After all, this was his town, his people. They were looking to him for answers, for justice, and he was determined to give them that. Slowly he moved away from the window, his mind buzzing with questions. Who would do such a thing? And why here? It seemed unfathomable, but he knew that speculation would get him nowhere. John understood the magnitude of the situation. The peaceful town he loved had been thrown into a whirlwind of fear and confusion. As the first cold winds of this chilling event brushed against him, he knew that he would stand against it, no matter what. The journey had begun, and there was no turning back. John stood in his living room, the weight of the news pushing down on him like the heavy snow on the mountain tops. His heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat mirroring the rhythmic ticking of the clock. The tranquility that had once been a comforting blanket now seemed eerie, a veil hiding the town's newfound fear. Despite the turmoil churning within him, John knew he couldn't simply stand by. This was his home. These were his people. If he didn't step forward now, when would he? Yet he hesitated. Doubts swirled in his mind, like dark clouds obscuring the sun. Was he really up for this? Did he have the strength to see this through? He thought of the girl, her face forever frozen in youth. He remembered her vibrant laughter, her bright eyes full of life, now extinguished. The thought was a punch to the gut, driving away his hesitations. He wouldn't let her memory fade into the abyss of unsolved crimes. He wouldn't let fear rule his town. John picked up his jacket, its familiar weight offering some comfort. He moved towards the door, his resolve hardening with each step. He had decided to dive into this frigid mystery, to hunt down the truth, no matter where it led him. As he opened the door, the cold mountain air rushed in, wrapping around him like an icy shroud. The town lay before him, its picturesque charm tainted by the grisly event. Every snow-capped roof, every hushed street echoed the chilling news. The peaceful town had been thrust into a chilling saga of crime and fear, and John was about to step right into the eye of the storm. His hand tightened around the doorknob, the cold metal biting into his palm. The doubts still lingered, like stubborn shadows at the edges of his mind. But John knew that he had no other choice. He was going to engage himself in the investigation, fight his personal demons, and unearth the gruesome reality that had slithered into his tranquil town. With a final glance at his quiet home, he stepped out into the cold, the door closing behind him with a soft click. There was no turning back now. He was in the fray. Chapter 3. Echoes of the Past. John trudged through the snow-filled streets of the town, his boots leaving a trail in the soft powder. Each step felt heavy, mirroring the weight of the task at hand. His gaze fell upon the mountains surrounding the town, their silent strength a reminder of the town's storied past. This town, now a tranquil retreat, hadn't always been so peaceful. Long before it became a haven for the weary and the famous, it had been a bustling mining town, full of grit and grime. The mountains that now invited skiers and hikers once echoed with the clink of pickaxes and the gruff voices of miners. The grandeur of the mountains was etched with the sweat and toil of those miners, the men who had braved the harsh terrain in search of precious metals. They had dug deep into the mountains' bellies, carving out a life among the rocks and roots. The mountains still bore the scars of those times, the abandoned mine shafts standing as silent testimonials to the town's industrial past. As John walked along the quiet streets, he couldn't help but marvel at the transformation of the town. The old mining buildings were now charming homes and cozy cafes. The rough paths, once trodden by miners, were now smooth roads, leading visitors to scenic viewpoints and ski slopes. Yet, beneath this modern facade, the echoes of the past lingered. The town had moved on from its mining days, but the memories were etched into its character, shaping its present. And now, with a mystery unfolding within its heart, John couldn't help but wonder if those old ghosts had stories to tell. The history of the town was not merely a backdrop. It was a part of its fabric, intertwined with its present. As John dug into the investigation, he knew he would have to dig into the town's past too. After all, every town has its ghosts, and sometimes these ghosts held the keys to unlocking the mysteries of the present. John stood before the entrance to one of the old mines, its yawning mouth a gateway to the town's past. The frigid wind whistled through the deserted shaft, carrying with it tales of hard labor, resilience, and a time when life was as tough as the rock they mined. Armed with a flashlight, he ventured into the mine, the echo of his steps a grim reminder of its emptiness. His light pierced the gloom, revealing the skeletal remains of the mine, rusty tracks, deserted tools, and walls bearing the marks of countless pickaxe strikes. He moved slowly, carefully, his senses alert to any hint of a clue. He knew it was a long shot, connecting the town's mining past to the gruesome crime, but he also knew he couldn't leave any stone unturned. As he dug deeper into the mine, he also began to dig deeper into the town's history. He discovered old records, forgotten stories of feuds and rivalries, and tales of fortunes made and lost. He realized that the tranquil surface of the town hid a turbulent past, full of complexities and conflicts. One story, in particular, caught his attention, a tale of a miner who disappeared mysteriously many years ago. Rumors were that he had found a vein of precious metal and had been killed for it. The story was hushed up, turned into a ghost story to scare children. But now it set John's mind racing. Could there be a connection? Was history repeating itself in a twisted way? The questions whirled in his mind like a snowstorm, but he was determined to sift through the flurry and find the answers. Emerging from the mine, John squinted in the bright winter sun. The peaceful town lay before him. Unaware of the depths of the past he was beginning to uncover. He knew his investigation was just beginning. He was mining for clues, digging into the town's past, hoping to shed light on its dark present. The echoes of the past were beginning to resonate with the town's current crime, creating a haunting melody that only John could decipher. As he walked back into town, he knew he had embarked on a path that would lead him into the heart of a mystery deeply rooted in the town's history. Chapter 4. Ripples in Serenity. John's investigations were like a stone tossed into the calm waters of the town, sending ripples across its peaceful surface. The residents, once laid back and welcoming, were now clouded with worry and fear. The hushed whispers of his inquiries spread from home to home, stirring unrest and suspicion. He walked through the town, past the ski rentals filled with chattering tourists, the charming cafes that served steamy hot cocoa, and the snow-covered parks where children once played without a care. The townsfolk watched him with curious and anxious eyes. The tranquility of the town was shattered, replaced by a tense anticipation. John's probing into the girl's death, a topic everyone wished to forget, stirred the pot of uncertainty. Was it really safe to walk home alone at night? Who was the culprit among them? These unsettling questions began to creep into the minds of the townsfolk, casting long shadows over their once serene lives. John could feel the undercurrent of fear growing stronger. He saw it in the hurried glances, heard it in the whispered conversations, and felt it in the chilly air. The town was no longer just a pretty picture postcard. It was a community facing a disturbing reality. He wished he could offer them some reassurances, some glimmer of hope. But for now, all he had were questions. Questions that shook the very foundations of their peaceful existence. Questions that forced them to confront their deepest fears. The tranquility of the town was now rippled with unease. As John trudged through the snow-covered streets, the questions echoed in his mind. Each one was a piece of the puzzle, a puzzle he was determined to solve. But he knew, with each passing day and each unanswered question, the ripples of fear were growing into waves. The serenity of the town was now overshadowed by the chilling mysteries it held within. As days turned into weeks, the once tranquil town was now in the throes of turmoil. The mystery of the young girl's murder was like a specter that hung over their daily lives, casting a cold shadow over the town's picturesque charm. The usually bustling ski slopes were quieter now. Tourists, who used to flock to this peaceful retreat, were now sparse. The laughter and cheers that once filled the crisp winter air were replaced by an eerie silence. The chairlifts moved up and down the mountain slopes with fewer passengers, their metallic creak a somber echo of the town's concerns. The celebrities who had chosen this town for its serene beauty and privacy now stayed within their fortified cabins. Even their star-studded presence could not outshine the dark cloud that hung over the town. Their lavish parties were hushed, the sound of music replaced by whispered discussions about safety and security. The quaint cafes and boutiques, which used to be bustling with locals and visitors, were feeling the pinch. Customers were few and far between, and a sense of unease hung in the air. The aroma of fresh coffee and warm pastries couldn't mask the scent of worry that permeated the town. The town was in turmoil, grappling with the harsh reality that had intruded upon their peaceful existence. The streets that were once a testament to serenity were now corridors of uncertainty. The shadows of the towering mountains seemed to loom larger, a grim reminder of the menace that had taken refuge in their town. As John observed these changes, he realized that the ripples he had started had grown into a tempest. But he knew he couldn't back down. The town was counting on him, even if their once warm smiles had turned into worried frowns. The town was in turmoil, and the lives of its inhabitants had been disrupted. Yet, in this time of uncertainty, John saw a glimmer of hope. The residents, despite their fears, were sticking together, standing strong in the face of adversity. They were not just waiting for the storm to pass, but learning to weather it. And that gave John the strength he needed to press on. The town might have been in turmoil, but its spirit was unbroken. Chapter 5: Shadows and Snow. Bundled up against the biting cold, John stood at the base of the mountain. The pristine white of the snow-covered slopes shimmered in the winter sun, a deceptive veil over the harsh conditions that lay ahead. His breath clouded in front of him, the only sign of life in the seemingly endless white wilderness. John was following a lead, a hunch that took him away from the familiar comfort of the town and into the wild, untamed mountains. Despite the chill seeping into his bones, he felt a spark of hope kindling within him. The mountain held secrets, and he was determined to uncover them. His boots sank into the snow with each step he took, leaving behind a solitary trail. The snow muffled his footsteps, the only sound the crunching of the icy crystals under his weight. Around him, the mountains stood sentinel, their icy peaks stretching into the clear blue sky. The winter elements were harsh, an adversary as formidable as the mystery he was trying to solve. But John was not a man to back down. He battled the bitter wind that tugged at his coat, his eyes squinting against the blinding whiteness that stretched as far as he could see. He trekked deeper into the wilderness, his mind working in tandem with his body. Every overturned stone, every trampled patch of snow could be a clue, a tiny thread leading to the solution of the puzzle that had turned their tranquil town upside down. As he moved further from civilization, the silence of the wilderness became more profound. It was in this silence that he could hear his thoughts, his theories taking shape, guided by the shadows in the snow. John was in the heart of the white wilderness, braving the winter elements, chasing after shadows in the hope of finding answers. The town might be miles away, but the urgency of his quest, the weight of their expectations, kept him going. His journey into the white wilderness was not just a physical trek. It was a test of his determination, his resilience. A test he was resolved to pass, not for his sake, but for the sake of the town that had placed their trust in him. The shadows in the snow were about to reveal their secrets, and John was ready to listen. As John continued his arduous trek into the heart of the mountains, the soft whiteness of the snow was disturbed by an unusual mark. It was subtle, a slight disturbance on the pristine canvas of white, but to John's trained eye, it was as conspicuous as a beacon. It was a clue, and a crucial one at that. The mark was an imprint, a sign of human presence where there shouldn't have been any. It wasn't a casual skier or an adventurous hiker. The pattern was too irregular, too hurried. It pointed towards someone who was here with a purpose, someone trying to stay hidden. John's heart pounded in his chest, the significance of the clue not lost on him. It was a sign that the killer might have ventured into these parts, might have been closer than anyone had suspected. The tranquility of the snowy wilderness suddenly took a sinister turn. His mind raced as he pondered over the implication of his discovery. Was the killer among them? Had he hidden behind the veneer of a peaceful townsperson, unsuspected and undetected? The thought sent a chill down his spine, colder than the winter wind that howled around him. With renewed determination, John followed the trail. The snowy mountains were no longer just a beautiful backdrop. They had become a labyrinth of secrets and hidden dangers. But he was undeterred. If the killer had hoped the snowy wilderness would conceal his tracks, he was mistaken. The shadows in the snow were deepening, hiding a danger that was threatening the tranquility of the town. But John was resolute. He would not allow fear to cloud his vision or deter his steps. He trudged on, his mind working to piece together the information, his heart yearning for justice. The snowy wilderness held a hidden danger, but it also held the key to solving the mystery that had cast a long, dark shadow over the serene town. And John was determined to uncover it, regardless of what it might reveal. Chapter 6. Veins of Silver, Lines of Red. Returning from the cold wilderness, John found himself drawn back to the town's mining past. The mountains, silent witnesses to decades of toil and ambition, held more than just minerals. They were keepers of secrets, memories embedded within their rocky folds. In the heart of the town, an old library housed the records of the past. Amid the musty scent of old paper and the silence punctuated by the ticking of an ancient clock, John began his investigation into the town's glittering past. His fingers trailed over countless documents, tracing the story of a town that had once throbbed with the excitement of a silver rush. He read tales of miners who had struck lucky, their lives transformed by the veins of silver running through the mountain's heart. As he delved deeper into these records, a particular story began to take form, a narrative that had been pushed into the shadows of the past. It was an account of a miner who had discovered a rich vein of silver, a find that could have transformed the town's fortune. But the miner had vanished, and with him, the knowledge of the precious vein. John's heart pounded in his chest as he pieced together the fragments of this tale. The town had carried this secret for decades, a mystery lost in the folds of history. This distant glitter of the past, he realized, could be connected to the present, to the horrifying crime that had shattered their peace. As he sat in the quiet library, the winter sun streaming through the frost-tipped windows, John felt a mix of excitement and dread. He had unearthed a secret, a lead that promised to shine a light on the mystery at hand. The town's mining past, its veins of silver, were revealing themselves not as distant history, but as lines connecting to the present. The lines of red, the terrifying crime, now had another end to follow, another knot to untangle. The distant glitter was starting to shine brighter, promising to illuminate the path to justice. With the lost tale of the vanished miner fresh in his mind, John returned to the scene of the crime. The snowy landscape, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, seemed to hold its breath as he began to connect the dots. He remembered the irregular marks in the snow, the hidden trail that suggested the killer's secret visit. His gaze traveled up to the mountains. The once majestic peaks now held a chilling secret. It all led back to the heart of the mountains, to the hidden veins of silver. A chilling thought crept into his mind. Could the murder be tied to the old tale? Could the vanished miner's secret vein of silver have lured the killer, leading to a horrifying crime? The questions swirled around him, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. The serene town, the abandoned mines, the missing miner, and the unsuspecting girl, they were all connected by a bloody thread. The veins of silver had become lines of red, running from the past into the present, from the heart of the mountain to the heart of their community. This bloody revelation was a shock, but it brought a new focus to John's investigation. It was a significant lead, a twist that no one had seen coming. But it gave John a starting point, a guide to hunting down the menace that had turned their tranquil lives into a living nightmare. John felt a surge of determination. The mountains, the snow, the chilling cold, they were no longer obstacles but allies, hiding clues in their icy folds. He was on the trail of a killer, and the discovery of the bloody revelation had just brought him a step closer to solving the crime. The sun set, casting long shadows on the snow. The tranquil town was quiet, but underneath the calm, a battle was brewing. The veins of silver had revealed their secret, and the lines of red were about to lead to their source. And John, the guardian of the town, was ready to follow, no matter where they led. Chapter 7. Avalanche. In the heart of the winter season, the mountains around the town were a treacherous territory, but none more so than the danger that John was facing now. As he delved deeper into the investigation, he found himself on a slippery slope, his every move watched by unseen eyes. Word of his investigation had spread, not just among the townsfolk, but also to the person he was hunting. The murderer was no longer a predator lurking in the shadows. He was now aware of the hunt, of the man who was daring to tread on his tracks. John could feel the change in the air, a tightening of tension that seemed to weigh heavy on the town. His movements were shadowed, his footsteps echoed with whispers of danger. His pursuit of justice had placed him in the crosshairs of the murderer. The mountain trails that he once traversed with ease were now fraught with dangers. Each rustling of the wind, each snap of a twig had him on high alert. The peaceful town was holding its breath, bracing for the avalanche that seemed imminent. His visits to the mines became more perilous. The deep, echoing tunnels seemed to close in on him, the shadows stretching to hide unknown threats. Yet he pressed on, his determination steeled by the very danger he was facing. John was aware of the perilous descent he was making. Uncovering the secrets of the town's past and chasing the shadows of a murderer was like navigating a dangerous downhill slope, each step needing calculated caution, each revelation a potential trigger for an avalanche. Yet John knew he could not turn back. The town was looking to him for answers, their hopes a beacon guiding him through the treacherous terrain. He had set off the initial rumblings, and now he had to face the avalanche, no matter how dangerous the descent. His life was on the line, but so were the lives of the townsfolk, and he would risk everything to keep them safe. The hunt was reaching a crescendo, the suspense winding tighter like a coiled spring. John, with each passing day, was moving closer to the truth, the pieces of the puzzle coming together to form a picture that was as chilling as the winter around him. His investigation led him through a labyrinth of clues, each more bewildering than the last. Yet, with dogged determination and an unwavering spirit, he followed the trail, his every sense on high alert. And then he found it, a piece of evidence so damning it could not be ignored. Hidden away in an abandoned mining cabin, he discovered a link to the killer, a connection that pointed straight at one of the townsfolk. It was a shocking revelation, one that would send ripples through the community. The murderer was not an outsider, not a ghost from the past, but one of their own. A person they interacted with every day, a face that blended into the crowd, hiding a secret darker than the deepest mine. Unveiling the identity of the killer was like triggering an avalanche. The truth came crashing down, its shockwave threatening to engulf the peaceful town. The faces of the townsfolk, usually warm and friendly, were now etched with fear and disbelief. Trust had been broken, replaced by a chilling sense of betrayal. John, despite the weight of the revelation, stood strong. He knew that this was only the beginning. Identifying the murderer was one thing, but bringing him to justice, that was a whole different mountain to climb. As the truth of the killer's identity seeped into the town, John prepared for the next phase. The avalanche had begun, and there was no stopping it now. It was time for the final confrontation, the climax that would decide the fate of the peaceful town. The stage was set, the characters in place, and the final act of this chilling drama was about to begin. Chapter 8. Dawn in the Mountains. Under the cover of a pale moonlight, John approached the cabin where the killer was believed to be hiding. The quaint wooden structure, nestled against the backdrop of towering mountains, stood in stark contrast to the dark deeds it concealed. Armed with the knowledge of the killer's identity, John felt a mixture of determination and dread. He was about to confront a monster hiding in human skin, a murderer who had shattered the tranquility of their peaceful haven. As he drew closer, each crunch of his boots on the frozen snow seemed to echo through the silent night. His breath misted in the cold air, a visual testament to the tension that hung heavily around him. With a deep breath, he pushed open the cabin door. It creaked eerily, the sound piercing the stillness of the night. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the dimly lit room. There, in the far corner, was the man he had come to confront. The room was heavy with a tense silence, the air thick with anticipation. The showdown that the town had been bracing for was finally here. Man against man, justice against crime, under the silent gaze of the icy mountains. Words were exchanged, accusations thrown, and truth unveiled. The man's facade crumbled, revealing the cold, ruthless murderer underneath. John, with the strength of his conviction and the weight of the town's hope, stood resolute. The cabin, once a haven for the killer, had become the stage for the final showdown. Outside, the peaceful town lay in anxious wait, the usually tranquil night now humming with silent tension. Inside the cabin, the confrontation reached its peak, the climax of the chilling drama unfolding in the heart of the mountains. John was not just battling a murderer, he was fighting for his town, for the innocent girl who had fallen prey, and for the tranquility that had been lost. This was the final showdown, a battle that was as much about unmasking a killer as it was about restoring peace to their haven. The dawn was breaking in the mountains, and with it, the end of the nightmare was drawing near. In the wake of the final showdown, a new day dawned over the town. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the snowy landscape. It was as if the town was waking up from a long, dreadful nightmare. John stood on the outskirts of the town, his gaze sweeping over the familiar streets and buildings. The town looked the same, but he knew it would never be the same again. They had lost their innocence to a horrifying crime, and while the killer was brought to justice, the scars would take time to heal. Despite this, there was a sense of relief, a quiet joy that resonated within the community. The ski slopes were once again filled with laughter, the cafes bustled with customers, and the residents walked the streets with a sense of safety. The town had faced a terrible adversary and emerged stronger. John found solace in the normalcy that was returning to the town. He was no longer just a resident. He had become the town's protector, their beacon during the dark times. He had unearthed secrets, confronted a murderer, and restored peace to their haven. His life had been irrevocably changed, etched with lines of red and veins of silver. As the town slowly healed, John reflected on the events that had unfolded. The experience had been a painful journey, a test of their resilience, but it had also brought them closer, forged bonds of trust and unity. The small mountain town was not just a picturesque vacation spot. It was a community that had faced down its fears, a community that stood together in the face of adversity. As the sun rose higher in the sky, John felt a sense of peace washing over him. The nightmare was over, the murderer was behind bars, and the town was safe once again. Life was slowly returning to normal, the echoes of the past fading into the distance. The dawn in the mountains marked a new beginning, a fresh chapter for the town and for John. As the town healed and thrived, John knew he had fulfilled his role. He had restored the town, brought back the tranquility they had lost, and in the process, found a new purpose in his life. The town had been through an avalanche, but now, dawn had finally arrived in the mountains.